incrementality is really the kind of golden compass to look at when you're trying to assess paid media's performance and develop future strategies for driving more conversions for your business.
Welcome to the Incremental Marketer, a content series where we meet with top marketing executives and leaders across industries to help you drive growth in your business. Welcome to the Incremental Marketer. I'm Paul Baruta, CEO of Slingwave, and today we have Sam Adler, Director of Media Insights and Analytics at Slingwave. Welcome, Sam.
Great, thanks. Happy to be here, Paul.
Sam has a storied background in media analytics at Slingwave, working with some of the top marketers in the world, and in his previous career at WPP and Group M. Sam, can you talk a little bit about your experience? Tell us more about your work at Slingwave and tell us about your previous roles as well.
Yeah, definitely. So I've had a pretty large career in a big agency for media and focusing on analytics with a lot of Fortune 500 companies, but also worked on fast-growing startups throughout my career. Specifically at Group M, I've worked with both Nestle and focused on their waters business. Nespresso was a very interesting dynamic in terms of how they think about measurement, knowing there's a large branding play going on constantly with Nespresso, but they're also trying to drive direct to consumer in terms of e-commerce. And then more recently, before joining Slingwave, I was started a new client, EssilorLuxottica, which is one of the largest eyeglass manufacturers. My prior life was more at Ogilvy, and that's more on the strategy and creative side. And I think there's a whole conversation to talk about analytics there. Came over to Slingwave probably almost 3 years now, and I really wanted to get into the problem of figuring out the solve for attribution. It's a very complex place. There are a lot of tools out there today to navigate. There's a lot of data signals to look through and synthesize that if you're interpreting them incorrectly, it could lead to wrong decisions. And so it's a powerful space that I wanted to dive more into the technology and product side of analytics.
As you are working with your partners, with our partners, with your clients in a capacity of understanding an attribution model, how does incrementality actually work?
Well, the idea and the guidance of incrementality is really trying to get you to the point where you can actually understand what's working well in your media mix and what needs improvement or maybe we need to optimize away from. In a more technical standpoint, from a paid media perspective, incrementality means that a given conversion or a fraction of a conversion was actually driven because they were exposed to paid media throughout their consumer journey. It strips out some of the other variables like promotions or pricing, or even just the fact that maybe 70% of your audience is already familiar with your brand and has a strong affinity to your brand and are going to purchase anyways. So incrementality is really the kind of golden compass to look at when you're trying to assess paid media's performance and develop future strategies for driving more conversions for your business.
And you've had this in market, and as you've talked about attribution, how understood do you think the concept of incrementality is at this stage?
I think we kind of do see the gamut. There are some folks that are looking at last touch still. There are some folks that are looking at view-through conversions and thinking that 100% of those view-through conversions are true. And then I think there's some folks that come to us knowing that they need to focus on incrementality and kind of understand the definition, but are looking for help on how to think about it within their media plan and media mix.
Got it. And you see these models, I think, as a marketer, if you're advising me, and I'm a e-commerce company, I've got Google Analytics, set up, and I trust my Google Analytics setup. What am I missing with that view of the world?
So with Google Analytics, there is a vast amount of data. What we see is a lot of customers come to us focusing on Google Analytics attribution model. A lot of users are using their last touch, last click model. There is the data driven attribution, but that still only incorporates attribution once a visitor gets to site from a specific source. So what we see with Google Analytics is probably what most folks see, either branded search or direct or organic search is getting a lot of credit for conversions. We also will see affiliate with kind of last mile discounts or cashback offers. They're getting a lot of credit for the conversion. But
Right, and you're like, I should cut everything but affiliate and brand search if you see that,
yeah,
and
and then
you're a marketer.
what we'll see with some businesses, but we'll see 60% of their budget is spent on brand. Yeah, great. Yeah, they're getting 95% impression share, and they're seeing a healthy ROAS from a last touch perspective. But what it's really doing is limiting their ability to grow further demand by moving to upper funnel messaging and broader storytelling for their business. Another scenario we see a lot is obviously with remarketing. So when someone comes to your site, you're able to remarket them on paid social or YouTube, etc. And those tend to be pretty efficient because they've kind of raised their hand that they're interested in your business, and we were trying to push them along the last mile to convert. So remarketing is important, but we tend to see businesses oversaturate their remarketing, which can be bad for two things. One, you're kind of wasting spend on people that are going to convert anyways, and you could be using that spend to find new demand. And two, oversaturating with remarketing can actually be pretty annoying to the end user. So you want to be careful with not over messaging to a prospective customer of yours.
You're telling the story of our lives, right, in terms of the day to day on analytics. But say you're a marketer and you're looking at remarketing and it's got a 35 ROAS. What's the reality of that? And how do you apply incrementality there? I mean, that's a very high ROAS, but we see it often.
Yeah, so that's a great example. You see with Facebook and Instagram, or in Meta Ads Manager, if you're running the media, you see that remarketing is driving a really high ROAS. It's driving a stronger ROAS than your prospecting audiences, which are going to be more broader interest-based audiences based on kind of your historical research on your customer persona. When you run through an incrementality model, these are kind of the first learnings you're going to see. A lot of remarketing is not incremental. And so what we see here is that the remarketing actually goes from a 35 ROAS based if you just look purely in uh, Meta Ads Manager. And then at the end of the day, really, it's a 5.3 incremental ROAS. And conversely, you do see that the prospecting audiences look lower from a platform perspective, but when you factor in incrementality, they're actually driving more of the business forward with a higher ROAS at 18. So this is very important because if you just look purely in platform, you're going to say, oh, I should just keep pushing spend towards remarketing, given what we're seeing with the return on ad spend from a platform perspective.
Right. Yeah. And cutting it in every other channel. So talk about brand and non-brand search as another example. What do you typically see and how do you advise marketers on how to try to reconcile brand and non-brand?
Yeah, and like I said, that's another common quick learning we see when we start looking at incrementality with different businesses. Obviously, brand is important for defending share of voice and whatnot because competitors will come in and buy your keywords. But there definitely is a saturation point where you don't need to spend more than you have to. And so, like you see in this scenario, branded search obviously has a pretty strong return on ad spend if you're just looking at last touch or looking in platform. But pretty small percent of that is actually incremental. Whereas on the other side, non brand, I mean, they're just searching your category, or even better, they're searching a competitor and you're getting them to convince to come to your business instead of a competitor. And so you'll see a lot higher incrementality there that we've validated and proven out. And that will really guide decisioning on kind of your mix between brand and non-brand.
That makes sense. And you've talked about the way to actually fill in those gaps. So some of the behind the scenes in terms of how do you get from that missing piece of the puzzle to a reconciled view. Talk about the role of view-based conversions and what is it that Google Analytics or other last touch models aren't factoring in.
Yeah, so I mean, any web analytics tool really is only capturing attribution once the user gets to site. So it's missing touch points that, hey, they saw your business on social media when they were browsing through stories or whatnot. They stopped and watched your video there, but they wanted to continue on their consumer journey from a social perspective, and later come to your website and convert. So GA is not accounting for that storytelling that's happening when a user doesn't come to site. And I mean, this can be beyond digital. Obviously, we with linear TV, out of home, a lot of messaging touch points that inherently aren't going to immediately drive a user to your website, but are important touch points along the way.
And you've got even more gaps these days with ad blocking, iOS, no mobile visibility into conversions for many platforms. How do you reconcile that piece of it?
The measurement space is definitely getting pretty messy with the privacy and just tracking limitations that have arose over the past 5 or so years. So we have an approach for kind of sampling opt-out rates for compliance, or mistracking rates based on the iOS 14 update, etc.
That's
So
this
that
missing conversion under modeling concepts idea. Is that right?
Yeah, so there's definitely an important component of factoring in what potentially could be missing to better account for the model. This is evolving over time because platforms are modeling out conversions now. Basically, every platform has some form of modeling. So definitely need to take into consideration the modeling component of platforms, but we tend to see a need to account for missing conversions based on the privacy implications. I think that comes to kind of the overall story of unified measurement, and how kind of Slingwave thinks about it from a best practice perspective. So looking at a unified measurement approach, you're kind of combining multiple attribution methodologies along with predictive modeling like media mix modeling, and experimentation is another important component, given the ability to run like a geo experiment or a holdout test is a good approach to get a kind of quick read on incrementality for a given tactic. So as a best practice, this your kind of future looking attribution model is unfortunately is going to be pretty complex, as you can see here. But from a data inputs perspective, you should be looking at, like I said, the multiple types of attribution models. So looking at last touch, I mean, last touch is important, but it needs to be discounted. Understanding the incrementality of things like brand, remarketing, affiliate, etc. And then the view through conversions that we're getting from platforms, whether your attribution window is the 7-day click, 1-day view on Meta, 30 days on Google Ads, depending on how you set the windows up. Those are important conversions to factor, but know that they're taking credit for any conversion, regardless if another channel touched that user as well. So our model needs to think through what is the actual overlap and incrementality of view through versus something like last touch. What you want to kind of use as a guidance is your overall source of truth of conversions, whether it be sales, subscriptions, etc. Because what we tend to see, if we say you sum up all view through conversions, we've seen time and time again where those actually equal higher than the total book of your business.
Is that
Um,
this slide, the too much pie, which is usually not a problem in my life, but actually it is too much pie. But tell us an example of how you have had a customer, maybe over report or grossly over report from an ad platform standpoint the role of paid.
yeah, I mean, I think what we tend to see is the dynamics between like a media agency versus the end business. The end business tending to look at last touch of web analytics or their source of truth. There's Shopify, if there's e-commerce, etc. Whereas the media agencies are looking at the view through credit that they're getting from platforms and are kind of optimizing that way. And when they kind of put together the reporting across Meta, maybe you're running programmatic, DV360, YouTube. We've actually seen that the total reported conversions is like 150% of what the business is actually doing as a whole. And so that's kind of an aha moment that you need to understand that there's every channel is kind of taking credit for the same conversions, and we need to think through an attribution model that will correct for the overlap and deduplicate those conversions.
So, real life example, the ad platforms say we drove 150% of your business, and you are saying the model actually says what, 10%, 30%, 50%? Where do you see models tend to end up? And it's obviously different
Yeah,
by brand,
definitely.
different by budget.
It definitely ranges depending on the business model and I guess like how much of the business is a commodity versus a brand affinity. But I'd say we typically see about probably like 30 to 50% of your business on your website or from an e-commerce perspective seems to be driven by paid media. Obviously, this could vary drastically depending on your budget level, your awareness levels, and whatnot, because we have seen more of a commodity driven business actually upwards of like 70% percent driven by paid. But general guideline, I think we've seen kind of 30 to 50%.
And then you just cracked the can open on the advanced concepts here, the lag prediction piece and the halo impact that you mentioned under modeling concepts. So there's both the amount that paid drove in a measurable time period, like 30 days from the ad. And then there's that exposure to conversion that might take a lot longer. How do you even start to quantify that? And what do those terms mean? Talk about lag and talk about the halo impact in a nutshell. What is that? How do you even start to quantify that?
Yeah, so lag becomes a little important when we're looking at attribution windows, especially when you kind of are looking at a given month's performance versus looking just at a long period of time. What we tend to see is early on in the month, your attribution looks pretty low because the window, say you have a 30-day window, you're only like 3 days into the attribution window at that point. So if you're isolating performance to that month, you're not really seeing the full story of what's happening. So we've built out in our model capabilities to kind of predict what a given day's conversions will increase to based on what we've historically seen with modeling. And that's important so we're not making rash decisions beginning of the month because performance looks poor. We're accounting for the fact that we should see this given day's performance increase based on what we've seen historically. On the halo impact side, that's more of looking at long term impact beyond one, what is being tracked by the platform, and two, beyond the actual attribution window of the platform. So breaking down Halo Impact, you're testing out streaming or CTV for the first time. The platforms reporting last touch conversions. One, it's not able to track it that well just due to the nature of device cross device tracking with CTV. But two, you may be running like display remarketing within the same setup, and lower funnel types of channels are then getting credit for those conversions. So our model predicts kind of the halo effect beyond what last touch is really saying, from even from a view through perspective. And then from a halo, just an attribution window, there are some business models, of course, that have a longer consumer purchase journey. I mean, obviously, if you think about cars, people probably aren't buying a car within a week, and it could be a multi-month type of buying journey, and the channels are only really maybe measuring 30 days. I mean, Google Ads can measure 90 days, but then you even have Meta that only has a 7-day post click and 1-day view. So we've built in approaches based on predictive modeling to measure the halo effect beyond what the attribution window is for a given platform.
Sam, we covered so much in this 20-minute overview. We talked about incrementality, how this is important to a marketer, thinking about your media mix from not just last touch or a platform metric standpoint, but an incrementality adjusted standpoint, thinking about how do you correct your analytics to not just take in what Google Analytics or Shopify or a platform that's last touch or click based says, but retrofitting it to include view based conversions, thinking about how do you correct for over credit, too much pie, never a good thing. And then you talked us through how, as a marketer, you could set up your analytics with a Slingwave model or a similar model in market. You can set up your analytics with an incrementality model to be able to correct those platform metrics and actually get to a decision matrix in terms of how you should be optimizing. Sam, this has been great. I think the unified measurement approach that you recommend for marketers is highly practical and will be extremely impactful as organizations adopt this. There's so many layers to this puzzle, but I think as you covered, data inputs, correcting those data inputs, retrofitting, and making sure that you don't have gaps on your data, using 3 different or more modeling inputs like a media mix model, multi-touch attribution, and experimentation, modeling both in period and future period impacts. That's that halo impact, and starting to split it into channel, tactic, creative, and more practical levels for the media team to optimize. Super important. So thank you, and look forward to having you on a future episode.
Great. Thanks for having me, Paul. But yeah, let's do this again.